Hello and welcome back to another episode of On Repeat, the podcast, the musical podcast with me, Hassie Winter.
And me, Ellie Rashid. So this week we're going to be speaking to Barney Whittakar, aka Footshooter, who's a London-based producer, DJ and musician. So his style kind of blends skippy, broken beats with atmospheric warmth from synths, keys and guitars, combining programming with live instrumentation to create an organic, rich sound. He frequently collaborates with MCs, poets and vocalists, exploring different tones and moods.
In this podcast, oh my gosh, we talk about so much. We touch on the work that Barney creates with In-House Records, which is a record label directed at helping those who are in prison or just coming out of prison to kind of have like another outlet, which is totally amazing work. We talk about how that influences his own music and productions, who he collaborates with and how he collaborates with them, his creative process during lockdown and how he's preparing for his upcoming gig, which is actually going to be, I suppose, last week when this episode airs. But we talk about how he's kind of prepped for that and what he's expecting from it. So maybe we'll do a little follow-up on how it went, because it's going to be a very different experience, I'm sure.
Footshooter has performed live DJ sets in support of the likes of Yusuf Kamal, Vels Trio and Alphamist, as well as performing regularly at South East London Night, Steeds and Brainchild Festival. He has most recently supported 3070 in their show at Jazz Cafe with his live band in July 2019. His 2017 release, Strange Days EP, Famous Friends, was well received, gaining regular plays on NTS, Balamii, Worldwide FM, and by Bonobo in a DJ set at his New York City Boiler Room.
Footshooter's also really big on collaboration, so he's collaborated with Jack Stevenson Oliver from Vels Trio, Poppy Adija, who, yeah, we totally love. Poppy, if you're listening, there is a episode with your name on it, as well as Brother Portrait from Steamed Out. I found the subject matter this week super important. I think the work that Barney does is really incredible. I mean, I even got like a bit teary in the recording because I have been sort of like personally affected by like people being in and out of prison and knife crime and all sorts of terrible things that are reality. And I kind of just think that, you know, so many people could be helped if there was more awareness around the subject, obviously like funding issues. You know, it's amazing that Barney does this work, and I really wish that more people could be supported with the work. So, you know, props to Barney, big up him, definitely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thanks for being really open about that as well, because I know that was a difficult moment, and even for me, like I haven't really been through the experience of having someone close to me go through any of that, and I found it really touching and moving. So thank you so much, Barney. And you know, he was extremely authentic and honest, which I think is so important for musicians, because it's something that I think can really radiate through their creative process and through their music, I guess. So thank you so much for that. Footshooter also hosts a monthly show on Peckham-based community radio station Balamii, which is called Sonic Fruits. So we'll put the link to the show in our show notes.
My friends were very much into, when we were teenagers, very much into like rock and indie and stuff like that. But then also like lots of people at my school were listening to hip hop and grime and R&B as well, so got exposed to that quite early on. So yeah, it was a big like mishmash of stuff.
Where did you grow up?
It's a town called Stroud in Gloucestershire, which is kind of...
Oh yeah, I know Stroud.
Yeah.
I'm from Bristol, so...
You're from Bristol, there you go.
Like, yeah, we're neighbours.
Yes. So I usually, when people have not, because most people haven't heard of it, so I usually say it's near Bristol, but it's not actually that near Bristol.
No, it's not. I
It's
used to
not.
get really annoyed by people, and they'd be like, I'd be like, "Oh, where are you from?" They'd be like, "Bristol." I'd be like, "Oh my god, I'm from Bristol too. What part?" And they'd be like, "Keynsham," and I'd be like, "That's not
Yeah.
fucking Bristol."
That was me. I used to say, I remember at festivals, people being like, "Where are you from?" And I was be like, "Oh, just outside Bristol," and they'd be like, "Oh, I'm from Bristol." Yeah.
Because
So we
everyone's
probably,
from
yeah,
Bristol. We
everyone's
you
from
can't get away from a Bristolian. We're like a rash. Oh my god.
a fun rash.
Oh yeah, like a good rash.
A good
A
rash,
rash after
not a
like
bad rash.
like the sort of the stamp on your hand from a club night when you get like a rash from that.
Yeah, fun rash.
Fun
Yeah.
rash. Fun rash.
You said when you were growing up, you had like all these different influences. So you were sort of playing rock and stuff like that, and then there was grime. So that was that like, were your friends listening to grime, or was that like played in your school, or what
Some
did
of
your
them,
parents listen to too?
What did my parents listen to? They weren't listening to grime. I mean, both my parents are musicians, not professionally, but so there was always lots of music in the house. Actually, yeah, lots of, when I was really small, lots of folk music. My mum back in the 80s used to play flute and sing in a folk band, and then so yeah, when we were kind of growing up, that was a lot of what was being played in the house. But then also my dad was really into like soul music as well, and like new wave and post punk. So he was like playing Stevie Wonder records, but also like the and Squeeze and stuff like that. So yeah, a bit of a mishmash, and then getting into kind of hip hop and R&B and stuff a bit later on. And also through going out in Bristol, actually going to kind of jungle nights and stuff there, being exposed to sound system music in that way.
Probably went to the same places.
We were probably at the same
Probably
nights.
at the same nights. Yeah. Where did you go?
We used to go to Motion.
Oh yeah,
it's a bit of an obvious one, and then we went to like Blue Mountain as well.
Oh yeah, that's where I broke my first digital camera. Dropped it down the concrete stairs on New Year's Eve. Oh
Sweet.
god, I only just got it at Christmas. I was so pissed off with myself. Great time.
Damn, that's not a very good like longevity for the camera.
No,
It's
5 days.
10 days. Yeah, 5 days.
So that's a pretty eclectic mix then. I wasn't, I guess I was trying to work out like what your influences would have been, because I hear like it feels to me like you've got quite a strong kind of jazz foundation, and I know it's really difficult to define like jazz now. It's really, really hard. But also I know that you've collaborated with a few people within that kind of under that umbrella. How would you label your own music if you had to?
Yeah, I mean it has got lots of influences from different places. You're right, there is a strong kind of jazz influence there. That's just come out of listening to lots of jazz over the past sort of like 5 or 6 years, and also watching lots of jazz being played live in South London. Because I went to uni in Brighton, and then I was in halls with my friend Tom Jocelyn, who was involved in helping to organise a night called Steez back in the day, which used to run in Lewisham, which was quite like a foundational night for lots of the sort of London jazz scene, basically. And so I started going to that it would have been like 2014, going out with them and just absorbing that. And was just kind of blown away by that. And then so that kind of got me into that kind of headspace a lot more. But then also always had a love for hip hop and poetry as well. So I try and like get a lot of, I love working with vocalists and MCs and spoken word poets as well, and kind of trying to blend that with the jazzier elements, but also mixing that with dance music and trying to like meet all of those things in the middle a little bit, I guess.
I can definitely hear that, especially in like who you've collaborated with. And like I was listening to your EP Libations and Movement off the top of my head. Yeah. And like I was listening to Catch My Breath, and I was like, oh, there's Tweet's in here.
Yeah.
And I was like, it kind of felt like a niche kind of like older sample of like a song that I hadn't heard for years, but obviously was like a huge song, and I think it still stands up today. It's like such a good like R&B hip hop track. So like with all the influences you have, does that kind of like help you pick and choose like who you work with and kind of how you work with them?
I guess so. I mean, it's probably more of a subconscious thing for me. Collaboration's like a massive part of the music I do, and that actually relates to the role of a producer in general, because although I kind of release music under my artist name Footshooter, I don't think of myself as an artist individually, like standalone. I see myself as more of a producer. So for me, it's about like working with people whose kind of either vocals or music excites me in some way, and I think it'll work. And then seeing the result that comes out of that, basically. Yeah, and I'm just like very lucky to be immersed in a scene that's full of people who are making music and performing that excites me and stirs me in some way, and then I'm able to kind of link with those people and make music together.
But how's it been during lockdown, where collaboration is not as accessible in a way, or has it been accessible to you? Have you still been able to make music? Have you made it remotely with other people? How's it been?
I've actually made more music this year than I have for the last like couple of years.
Wow.
Yeah. Just because of being locked down and not having to work alongside, and like actually having months where that's all I could kind of focus on. So yeah, it's like a 9-track album that I've finished a couple of weeks ago, which has generated mostly this year. And in terms of the collaborative component of that, a lot of that was recorded remotely, so people would kind of record. I'd send an instrumental across and people would write the lyrics to it or whatever, and then send me vocal stems back, and I'll mix it and then send it back to them. So we're kind of doing back and forth. But then also there's been periods of time like during the break in lockdown, in like August and September, when it was kind of safer to do so, people came round to mine and kind of recorded and stuff like that. And then outside of that project as well, just I've done lots of like single tracks that are going to come out on various compilations and stuff like that. But yeah, a lot of it has just been remote, so it's a case of just sending people stuff and then them sending vocals back, which is kind of strange.
Yeah. Do you think though that this lockdown experience, do you think it's going to dictate how you might work in the future?
That's a really good question. I think so. I mean, I think it's just made remote working more of a kind of option. And for me, like my ideal thing is getting everyone in a room and writing something from scratch. But obviously, that's not feasible for a lot of people. And I think the benefits of remote working are that you can collaborate with people that aren't. In theory, you can just collaborate with someone anywhere in the world, right? If you can do it via email and send them like stems and stuff like that. So it opens up, it kind of like reduces the amount that you're restricted by location, in that regard. But I think I'm still quite keen on doing it IRL when possible, because I think there is something you lose slightly from doing things on email.
Yeah. Did you get any surprises through? Was it like you kind of thought somebody would maybe write or create one thing and kind of put something back that still worked, but you were like, oh, I didn't expect that?
Not really. I think it's all been I've been the way I've been surprised by it, or it's not really surprised, but I've just been, all the people that I have worked with that I've sent off stuff to, the stuff they sent back has just been amazing, and it's kind of like listening back to it for the first time has been just wild, kind of hearing how people respond to things, especially when it is remote, when it's a process of kind of, it's almost like turn taking in the songwriting process. So it's like I'll send an instrumental and they'll add a bit and then send it back, and then I'll add a bit and send it back. And yeah, just the things that's generated, I've been really surprised by the quality of it from people have been sending me. It's been really exciting. So
it must actually be really exciting to get through and be like, what's it going to sound like? I guess when you're all in a room, you can like you can hear, you kind of know what to expect, I guess. But it must be like, oh, what's in the inbox today? Like, let's have I don't know, maybe it brings the magic back to kind of that feeling of when you first listen to a track that you're like, this is so good.
Talking of IRL as well, which like I think I didn't know what that meant until quite recently, and I just felt like such an idiot. Like people are like IRL, like, and I was like, OMG. I don't have TikTok or whatever. Anyway, talking of IRL, I tried to book a ticket for tomorrow to see is it your first post-lockdown gig?
Yeah, it's my first DJ set since February. Yeah.
Mate. How, like, okay, right. So I'm so gutted that I can't, well, I can come, but it's completely sold out. And I thought I was going to be getting in there quickly. I thought, oh, this is going to be a great birthday present. I'll bring my mates. We can go. Hattie was going to come as well. And straight away, like that, like just completely booked. And it's not surprising because people have been craving live music. People have been craving a DJ set. And I think it's going to be incredible. But how are you feeling about it? Do you think it's going to be a bit strange, or are you really looking forward to it?
I'm really looking forward to it. That's one of the things that I absolutely love about what I do is playing music for people. It's been something I've been obsessed with since I was really young. Like always putting shit. I'm the guy on the aux cable at parties like all the time.
Yeah.
So to be able to do that like in a professional setting is incredible, and like yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be very different to the kind of DJ sets I was doing pre-lockdown because everyone's going to be seated. It's going to be more of like a kind of bar vibe. And people won't be allowed to dance, which is going to be jokes.
I'm just dancing on the table.
I had like Luke, who's a producer called EVM128. He runs Dance Regular, who released my Libations Movement EP. He was telling me that because they did some events in Tottenham during like the last break between the lockdowns when it was kind of safe to do so. And he was saying it was just like it was a really nice vibe, but the security were literally going around like telling people to stop dancing. Like he was standing up, like just like shuffling a little bit, and the security came over and told him to stop moving. He had to stand completely still because the legal side of it is like they're not. If like I don't know, like if on the off chance that police turned up and saw people standing up like wiggling or whatever, they would get shut down and all this kind of stuff. So.
That's horrible.
Yeah,
it feels so like opposite to what everyone kind of wants from going out, and
that's what
mad.
I mean. Yeah, it's gonna be a release in some ways, but also maybe quite frustrating for some people.
A frustrating release.
A frustrating release. Yeah.
The idea of somebody being like, "Oh, like what are you like in here for?" And it's like, "Oh, I wiggled." I wiggled.
Yeah, getting banged up for wiggling. Yeah.
Are you like kind of crafting your set? I don't know if you like kind of practice before and whatever, but are you kind of crafting your set to kind of accompany that kind of more bar kind of setting, or are you just going to go hard and be like, I haven't played in months, fuck it, have some gabba?
I mean, there's a part of me that always wants to play gabba.
I think that's in everyone.
Yeah, especially when it's at a bar in Hackney.
In a gabba.
Yeah, like in a gabba. Yeah, I mean, I 100% will like have. I don't really plan sets that much, but I'll have in mind like the various kind of moods I want to go for because. Yeah, I'm playing for like 4 hours and it's in a bar where people are going to be sitting down and eating. So if I'm playing slammers, it might be a bit incongruous. I mean, I'm going to see what the vibe is. People might want that towards the end, but it's going to be it'll be really fun actually to play for that length of time as well, and it to be in a more relaxed setting because I'll be able to play stuff that I wouldn't play in a 2 a.m. club set, for example. So yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah, nice. I think it's nice that you work that way with Sense and the Vibe. I mean, I would assume that a lot of people who DJ do that, but I wonder if there are some people that do plan really meticulous and like sort of meticulous sets and know exactly what they're doing. Do you find that you kind of work with that similar framework with all the work that you do? Because you say you do quite a few different different things, and I know that you do like volunteering, and it seems like you have lots of kind of strings to your bow as a musician. And do you work in that kind of improvisatory style, and where you kind of sense the vibe and sense read the room, I guess?
I mean, so like one of the bits of work that I've been doing since August is working with a record label called In-House Records, which is a label which works with men who are in prison in London and in the southeast of England in general, and also guys that have just come out of prison recently. And it's kind of, its overall aim is to reduce the rates of recidivism in the kind of cohort of guys that we've been working with, so reduce reoffending rates basically through giving them something engaging to like focus on when they come out, but also when they're inside, to give them something to do, because it's prison's a madness on your mental health and your kind of confidence and all sorts of things, as we know. So originally I got the role in like February, and I was going to be helping to kind of do music production workshops in H&P ISIS, which is in Thamesmead in southeast London. But because the prisons have been locked down, I've been, since like August, I was doing studio sessions with the guys that they were working with who'd been released at Pirate Studios in Greenwich. And that was more of a kind of facilitation role in terms of, and production in terms of, they kind of would come in with either with beats that they'd ripped off YouTube or kind of ideas of tracks they wanted to make, and I would either make a track with them from scratch or rip something off YouTube and help them like record it and arrange it and all that kind of stuff. And there was a massive part of that which was very improvisational and creative, especially when they wanted to just make something from scratch. And I've actually had some of the most pure moments of joy that I've ever had from music actually doing that work this year. In those moments, like there's been a couple of moments which I think I'm going to remember for a long time, where there's just been just points where we've kind of generated something and everyone's tapped into a certain energy in the room, even though we hadn't even like met before. And there's something about as well kind of just where those guys are at with their lives and what they've been through, and then that was kind of Do
you have an example of one of, I mean, you don't have to share it as well, obviously, if it's like, you know, very personal or private, but do you have an example of any of those really special moments?
I mean, so I was doing a session with a guy who I'd worked with quite a lot, and he brought along two of his friends who I hadn't kind of met before, and who they as far as I'm aware weren't working with the label directly. It was him who was working with the label, but then he brought along two mates who were also kind of MCs and vocalists, and then we did like a really good like sort of 6-7 hour session where we were working on tracks that all three of them had kind of brought to the table, and then we had like, I think there was like 20 minutes left, and they all went out to smoke a cigarette and were just like, just come up with something and we'll come back in. And I was just like, okay, shit. And so I remember I had like a kind of chord sequence in my head for a couple of weeks before that, and I just started playing it on the MIDI keyboard in Pirate Studios, and they came back in and I made a little kind of bumpy beat for it, and it kind of turned into this like R&B jam where the hook was like something about your body, babe, and they all started like singing it and kind of like clapping in the room and like standing up. And I was just playing it on this like shit MIDI keyboard, and there was this moment, and they all just started freestyling, and there was it was because it was the last like 10 minutes of the session as well before we had to leave the room, so it's just the energy just like congealed into this moment that was I was just like smiling for like 2 days afterwards.
Just like wiggling.
Wiggling, illegally wiggling. Exactly.
Does that get released, the track?
That track hasn't. No, we haven't actually worked on it since that 10 minutes. It just like, it was just this burst, and then just
Sometimes those moments are actually best not recorded. Weirdly though, because I feel like we record so much, but actually, and it's the same with pictures and videos. There's so much out there, but the stuff that you kind of hold in your head, like those moments are sometimes it's just bad like that, I think.
100%. Yeah, and that's something I kind of have in my head a lot about social media as well. Is I think it's really important to actually just remember things sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
Came back, you guys were talking about drill and appropriating drill and things like that, and I was so interested in this, and I wondered if that is a genre that really came up whilst you're doing this work. Is it something that you've learnt more about as well as a genre?
That's a really good question. I mean, yeah, it's I've been aware of it for a couple of years, but never really engaged with it that much. And yeah, it's complicated. On the one hand, it's really important that guys who are in situations like that, where the situations that bear out music, such as drill, it's really important that they have an outlet for that, and that it's honest and it's not kind of trying to like dumb down the reality that a lot of guys like that are living in inner city communities. And on the flip side of that, also, like, because I worked in a school in Hackney for 2 years, secondary school, and I was working with lots of young people where their kind of older siblings were involved in gangs and were drillers and stuff like that. And so I found it quite conflicting to listen to the music for quite a long time, especially when I was working there, because part of me respected the freedom of expression and really thought it was really important, but then also another part of me felt strange celebrating music that is about violence and about kind of young people of colour killing each other in a city context, especially relating to the work that I was doing at the time. It felt a bit too close to home for me to be listening and celebrating that as a kind of white middle class guy that's moved to the city. And I felt a bit strange about there's a lot of stuff going on there, but how that relates to the music I've been doing with In-House is I kind of try and focus on the fact that so guys will come in and be like, oh, can you make me a beat like this, and they'll play me a drill track or like a kind of American trap track, and I'll make an instrumental that sounds similar to that, and then they'll record their lyrics on that. And in terms of lyrical content, the stuff that they're recording in that context is we had to kind of tread the line in those sessions between freedom of expression, but also not wanting lyrics in there that basically are kind of celebrating or glorifying that kind of violence, and also just from the label's perspective, not wanting to generate tracks that will be hard to kind of shop around for radio plays and stuff like that. So it's a lot of balancing that stuff, is a lot to think about. I mean, I remember having a conversation with one of the guys I was working with where because I'd been told by someone that works within the label that we had to kind of be a bit careful about what lyrics were being recorded if they wanted it to release under the label's name, and also the way that it kind of the dynamic and the way in which it relates to a lot of the guys having recently been released from prison, and then if they're releasing tracks through the label that kind of reference certain crimes and stuff like that, it gets into quite kind of dodgy territory. And also, yes, from a PR perspective, like from the label's perspective, it's hard for them to promote music that has certain lyrics in it just for radio plays and such. But I had I kind of went in, and there was one guy I was working with in particular where he had some lyrics, and I kind of, because I'd had that conversation with someone that works at the label, I was like, oh, we need to kind of maybe try and find other ways of saying what we want to say in this context, which was an interesting, and he actually did, the response he gave me was so eloquent and kind of stuck with me, and then that he just basically said he wasn't talking about the life that he leads now. Like he was just like I live with my mum, and I just go to work, and I come in here and record music now. And the stuff that he was referencing was about his life before he went into prison. And he said it's so important to represent that stuff and to have people aware that kind of those lives exist and that situation exists for people.
It's difficult, isn't it? You don't want to like censor people.
Yes.
Since towing that line, and people have to realize that these things are real, they're not fake.
People kind of think that it's encouraging violent behavior, where it's actually just people kind of dictating their reality and things that have happened to them. And that's such an important thing for people to understand and realize. And Hattie, you're talking about censorship as well. I think the interesting thing about a lot of drill, we hear like kind of coding like within the words and like interesting metaphors and this sort of language that's been made up. And I did wonder actually, Barney, when you were talking about having to be careful about the content that was put out, did you find that there were any kind of like little codes that were used in kind of a drill-esque way?
100%. There was lots of inference and lots of metaphor in there.
I've been doing kind of drill and grime projects, but with completely different age groups, and I definitely think that it's influenced my own music making. Do you feel like it has with yours as well? Obviously, you had quite a strong influence in jazz, and you said that your parents listened to some folk and different. You've got like everything, and then you've got this whole other little baby. Do you think it's influenced you there?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it just, if anything, it's got me just listening to more kind of current UK rap. It's definitely more like UK rap and grime than drill, I'd say. But just in terms of the stuff that the producers that work in those kind of musical zones, like the production is so interesting, and it's really, really sick, and like actually quite forward thinking and progressive in lots of ways. Because that music is having a creative boom at the moment, and that there's just some really interesting stuff happening there from a production perspective, and through like working with the guys and them kind of coming in and being like, I want this kind of beat, I had to adapt really quickly to learning how to make certain sounds and kind of get the outcome that they wanted from it. So it's definitely like influenced my own music in terms of just the sounds I'm starting to use and the stuff I'm listening to more, and I guess that will it'd be interesting to see if that does filter into my own stuff as well. But also the kind of tracks I've been making with the guys, although they were kind of often, when we have made stuff from scratch, it's very much been like they've wanted certain elements from tracks that they're familiar with, so like drum patterns and stuff like that, but then what's blown me away is the level of adaptability from them in terms of like a lot of the time they've been really open to me playing some kind of like jazz chord sequence over the top. And like actually and the results that have come out of that have been mad. And I was actually listening through a lot of the tracks last night, and it does just some of the results from that kind of blend of the two different elements are really interesting, and I've just been really impressed by the level of open-mindedness from the guys basically that I've been working with. They've been really up for me kind of pushing it a little bit, and it's been really cool.
Sounds like you had a great experience. We're talking about like drum patterns and having jazz chords, and I would actually really like to know how you kind of do attack making a piece of music. Do you start with drums? Are you always starting with chords? Are you starting with loops?
It's usually drums, because drums is like my main instrument. I usually make a beat basically, and then I'll go on the roads and kind of work out a chord sequence to fit that, and then kind of build it around that, and build like kind of write some melodies and stuff like that, and then do the arrangement kind of later on. Basically. And
how do you what kind of inspires your drum patterns? Is it kind of like is it something else that you've heard, or is it like you said, you just have like something in your head and you're like, I'm just going to try and get it out, and then
it's 100%. It's just constantly in my head. I was the guy in secondary school who was like drumming on the table.
Oh yeah, one of those people when they like take away your like pens and pencils, and you've like still got hands.
I've relentlessly pissed people off throughout my life for doing that. And so this is very much just getting out. Kind of, I'll just be like drumming on my legs all the time, and then when I come to it, I'll kind of just make a beat that's in my head, and then
Do you play drums?
Yeah.
Like physical? Are you doing this like with real drums as opposed to like, I'm thinking of like digital drums and like tools and stuff?
I use a mix of the two. Yeah. So it's I'll use some program drums, and then I'll record a lot of the kind of percussion parts, and like I don't actually, in the place I'm in now where I'm producing, I don't have a drum kit set up, but in the last place I was in, the studio I was in before, I did have my drum kit set up, so I was able to kind of record in live drums as well. But that's something that really, I love it when producers like combine live and programmed elements in drums. I think you just get an amazing like richness and organic sound to it that you can't get through just like drawing stuff in on Logic.
Yeah, it becomes quite like textured, doesn't it? It's nice.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you think it's possible to produce and create beats without being able to play drums or having any knowledge about it? And I guess this kind of intertwines with a debate about music and privilege. If there's anyone listening and they're thinking, well, music's not an accessible or feasible career choice for me because I didn't have those options, how easy do you think it is for someone who feels like they're in that position?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it is definitely harder if you don't have a musical background. I started producing music when I was a teenager, and although I'd had a background more in kind of guitar music in terms of the stuff I was playing, it was like quite early on, started experimenting with like sampling and beat making and stuff. But I was only really able to do that because I'm middle class and like my dad had an iMac. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's levels to it. I just had that accessibility in my house, and so was able to jump on that and start experimenting. And then through that did like a music tech A-level, and then and it kind of flowed out from there. But that's just not the reality for like so many people who would want to get into music. And that's why I think it's so important that there are like courses and such available for young people. What really kind of struck me when I was working at the school in Hackney was supporting, because I was working with kids with special educational needs mostly there, even though it was a mainstream secondary school, but I was working with SEN kids within that. And when I was supporting kids in the music lessons there, like the music GCSE curriculum, for example, hasn't really changed since I did it 10 years ago. It's still very oriented around classical music, and the contemporary music that they choose to include is literally Queen and stuff like that. Queen is about as contemporary as they get in terms of the stuff that's included in there, which is astonishing. And I don't think that is an accident. I don't think that that's just laziness.
Is that like down to the schools or to the teachers or to, because I'm thinking that because I did a music tech GCSE, and so it was like we could produce and we could kind of do whatever we wanted in a way. I think I remember making some terrible like hackneyed version of Kate Nash. It was so fucking bad. But like it was quite cool because you didn't, I can't play any instruments, and we could just like use Logic and do whatever. But I also kind of maybe recognized that my music teacher was like particularly like down with the kids, I guess.
So I think there's lots of, I mean, I'm specifically talking about the music GCSE because like I don't think most schools offer music tech at GCSE level. I might be wrong, but as far as I know, it's mostly just music, and even that, a lot of schools are stopping kind of offering that because the government's cutting funding to it. But so it's down to what's on the curriculum and what schools are allowed to teach at GCSE level, because it's like the exams and coursework has to be on certain topics, and that's not decided by the school. So there's a limit to, I think there's room, because I was actually tutoring a girl for music GCSE like last year briefly for a couple of months, so I kind of like got my head into the curriculum again, and there's like a compositional element to it where you can use music production technology, so you can like make something in Logic, for example, but like the school I was working at didn't have any computers in the music department. They had, you know, those keyboards that you have in music classes that we had in music class when we were at school. They had those they had those keyboards with the DJ button. They had the same keyboards there, and I think there was one iMac in like a studio room somewhere in the music department, and that, I think that's like representative of the equipment situation in lots of state schools. And so just it's just all of these things are just stacked against you if you don't have equipment like that at home like I did, and if you don't have the opportunities to kind of experiment with that kind of stuff, but also like that compounded with the curriculum being so obstructive and actually just completely at odds with what most young people in this country, the kind of music most people listen to and are passionate about and care about. Through working with teenagers and kids the last couple of years, like pretty much especially teenagers, every teenager you speak to, or like the large majority of them, listens to music all the time, is like completely obsessed with music, knows like they could recite you the lyrics to like an entire album of something that they love. Do you know what I mean? There is that passion there, but that's just not in any way tapped into by the education system. It's just completely ignored, and it's such a shame thinking about the number of kids that I feel would genuinely thrive in kind of pursuing music at an education level higher than like at GCSE level, then at A level, at degree level, but they don't, because they look at the GCSE syllabus and it's classical music and Queen, and they're like, that bears no relation to anything I've ever experienced. If you don't, do you know what I mean? I feel like it's a massive barrier for people. And then you couple that with equipment and all this kind of stuff, it's really
And I think it's important that people, especially musicians, stay authentic in that way. I think it's very easy for people to feel like they need to be pigeonholed to genres and be someone else, and in doing that I feel like you're shutting off some really important opportunities to help other people get into music and help to keep it accessible and inclusive. So thank you for mentioning that. That's really, really nice.
We were talking about collaborations earlier on, and I just wondered if there's anyone that you'd like particularly like to collaborate with, if you could. It doesn't have to be feasible, it could be like Prince.
Dead Prince. No, I wouldn't want to collaborate with Prince. That would be terrifying. It would be terrifying. Can you imagine? Oh my god! To be honest, there's still people in South London that I want to work with. There's like an endless list of people. So I'm gonna hopefully make that happen over the next couple of years. But
oh nice,
we'll see.
Sick. It's funny you mentioned South London, because I was gonna ask you a little bit about that. I just wanted to touch on the South London jazz scene, I guess, a little bit, and I'm just thinking as well, because you're not from London, outside London, like what do the jazz scenes look like in the UK, and how do they compare? Do you think there's a lot of glorification around perhaps the South London jazz scene, or do you think it's justifiable, and what do you think the future of it is?
So I think there's kind of it's a kind of wider question around media representation of music journalism, and how that intersects with the reality of people making music in a place, and how it affects that as well, and how it affects people's perceptions of it. I think there's been a lot of media generated hype around the London jazz scene, which we're all aware of and stuff, and it's for a reason. It's because there's been like a amazing kind of fiercely creative output of music coming out of this part of London over the past sort of like, well, I'm reluctant to say like 5 or 6 years, but it's been way longer than that. It's been a lot of the people who are playing here have been playing since they were teenagers, do you know what I mean, and kind of coming up. So it's that I've only just moved to London, so I wouldn't be able to like speak on that, but I think in terms of the London centricness of it, that's very much a media generated problem, and actually there's really good bands in Bristol, really good jazz bands in Bristol, Manchester, Leeds as well, and it all, like the northern jazz that's coming out at the moment is very different tonally to a lot of the stuff that's coming out of London, and it's really like really interesting and beautiful, but it kind of doesn't, the way that music journalism kind of tries to package things means that I think a lot of that stuff gets missed in that process, basically.
I wonder if that will change because of lockdown. Because I think a lot of people, like I know people that are like leaving London because it's like the London price you are happy to pay because of the London lifestyle, and then without the lifestyle, you're like, why am I really here? So I think as people do move to Bristol, Brighton, Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, we're going to start seeing more like news about those places. That's kind of my theory.
Yeah, I mean, like there is already really amazing stuff happening in all of those places. So I think for me, it's more just about maybe music journalists paying a bit more attention and being a bit more nuanced when they're kind of talking about London jazz or whatever. Because there's there's amazing music coming out of every part of the UK at the moment. And I think you do just miss a part of that picture if you try and box it too much, basically.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll see some like links connected. Yeah, it's just like a missing like chain, isn't there?
Who are you keeping on repeat at the moment?
I've been listening to, so there's a singer from Chicago called The Mind, who I've heard some of his stuff over the past couple of years. He's collaborated with like Mick Jenkins and No Name and people like that, and Saba as well, who's really sick artist from Chicago. But yeah, he just dropped a project like 2 weeks ago, so I've just been like rinsing that until I go crazy, basically. Yeah.
Sick. Oh well,
Perfect.
Thank you for being such an amazing guest. It's been really, really great, and I hope that everything goes well tomorrow. I'm really sad that we can't be there.
Yeah.
We'll be wiggling at home.
I'll play some Gabba in your honour.
Yes.
Thanks a lot, and yeah, thanks for having me today. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. So.
Oh. Amazing. Thank you so much, Barney, for such an interesting...
Really a unique conversation, I'd say.
And we will be wiggling in anticipation. So, yeah, thanks so much, Barney. You've been an amazing guest. And if you want to check out a little bit more of Footshooter, you can visit his Instagram, which is at Footshooter Sound, all one word, and also on Facebook at Footshooter Music. Be sure to check him out on Bandcamp. So that's Footshooter Beats.
Yeah.
Next week is going to be our last episode before we break up for Christmas.
I know, we're going on our little Christmas break.
Remember, you can get your On Cloud Pie trees.
Oh my gosh, yes you can. If you're still looking for trees, they will have trees for you.
Yes. We've got a lot of really, really interesting guests in the pipeline for the new year. We feel like 2021 is going to be a better year for everybody. And we're really looking forward to sharing more of our podcast love. So
if you've made it this far, then definitely give us a review.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.